Now, a row broke out this week after the Charity Commission chairman, William Shawcross, said large salaries paid to charity staff could bring the charitable world into disrepute. The Daily Telegraph reported on the pay of senior managers at 14 different UK charities, some of whom were earning well over £100,000 a year. There was some fierce reaction to the revelations, but Sir Stephen Bubb, who leads an organisation representing leaders of voluntary bodies, described the furore as a disgraceful distraction. The Catholic aid agency CAFOD is one of the charities mentioned, although their director is not one of the highest earners. And Sunday Morning Live went to meet one of the people who decide how much the boss of that charity is worth. CAFOD works in more than 40 countries. It pledges itself to reducing poverty and helping poor communities regardless of faith. It has a budget of £50 million. Bishop John Arnold, an auxiliary bishop of the Diocese of Westminster, is chair of the charity's trustees.
And we're in places where none of the other agencies are working, and we're working with the poorest of people, accessing them clean water and helping them to maintain a sustainable livelihood.
CAFOD provides disaster relief, education and long-term development. The charity's director is paid just over £90,000 a year, but Bishop Arnold does not feel this salary is at odds with CAFOD's mission.
Whether we like it or not, we're in a market economy, and that means that people have expertise and they look for those skills that are required for the job to be done. On the other hand, we're dealing with people who are very generously giving money to charity for the poorest people in the world. And we've got to balance those two things so that we make sure that the money that is given is used well. And for that, we need to provide a director who is able to use the money in the best possible sense.
CAFOD also campaigns on issues related to its work. The charity employs 400 people in England and Wales and works with 600 partner organisations overseas. Bishop Arnold believes recent criticism of high salaries doesn't take into account the complexities of running such a big operation.
There are some people who have been a bit concerned that maybe they should cancel the direct debit, and for that we recognise their generosity in the past. I've written to them and explained to them how we come to the salary that we pay to our director and the purpose behind our calculating of that salary. And there are also some people who have been phoning to say how remarkable it is that the CAFOD director actually is so low compared with many of the other charities.
Despite the negative reaction there has been to the pay of senior charity staff, Bishop Arnold says CAFOD has no plans to change its wage structure or future recruitment policy. Bishop John Arnold there from CAFOD. So is charity just another big business that needs the best qualified managers paid the market rate? What do you think? Vicky, charities work with the poorest people in the world, and some people feel it just doesn't sit right with these six-figure salaries.
Well, I think to attract and retain the very best people to run these organisations, you have to offer a decent amount of money. And one of the key arguments made is that it would put people off from donating. And I think that shows an inherent lack of understanding, this false dichotomy of either we channel money to the front line, where it's really going to good use, or we channel money to the senior teams. Everybody knows that, a good mechanic model of running an organisation, it's not a dichotomy. It's the same thing. You need great, skillful people to enable the money to reach the right location.
The old best people for the best job argument.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to name any charities because it's not appropriate, but there are some of these charity bosses who have picked up fairly healthy pay rises, and yet the amount of money coming into the charity has decreased. That, to me, cannot add up. If you are running a charity and you're actually taking less last year than you are this year, and yet still you allow yourself to have a bonus or a pay rise, that is inherently wrong. And I think the people who fill the tins or fill the envelopes, I think they have very strong views.
It is interesting with charity, Rosie. People do often think there's a vocation that should be at the heart of it.
Absolutely. I think it's completely disgraceful that 30 of the charities' bosses earn over £100,000 a year, and 11 of them earn more than the Prime Minister. And I'll name the charity that you did not wish to name. It's the Red Cross.
Okay.
The chief executive of the Red Cross earns over £180,000 a year. This is an 11% or 12% rise on last year,
But
and the Red Cross has had a 1% drop.
It's tricky that
in
it's
its
not
income.
representative.
I mean, the thing is, these charities
completely-
aren't here to speak for themselves, but of course,
it's-
charities like the Red Cross and Oxfam deal with huge amounts of money. They're administering funds, you know, the scale that
Yes, they're
governments
administering.
administer.
They're not working in. They are not private enterprises. They are not for-profit enterprises.
got a retail
they are
chain.
charities. You know, I think you have to
But
really
if-
question the motivation
Hang on. If
of
a
the
charity,
CEO.
if a charity is doubling its take, so a man or woman comes in and revolutionises it, and they're taking double.
Yeah.
Why should you necessarily not be paid well because you seek to
Listen,
work in
Nick,
charity?
Nick,
No,
people go to work for all different reasons. People have different
pay them
motivations, and yes, but not everyone wants to do a good job just for money.
No, but
Doesn't that
hang on.
diminish the
If
importance
you're
of the
running
work?
a
It's just
charity,
why shouldn't you be able to do
and-
both? Why,
and
when you look at a career
well,
path,
because-
would you have to
because-
choose between providing for your family
I tell you
or
why,
doing humanitarian
because
work?
charities depend on volunteers who do an awful lot of the work for charities. I mean, I do a lot of running in marathons, and they're out there the whole time. The Macmillan volunteers, people shaking tins.
Isn't volunteering a whole different sector, though?
They are a
But it
massive
isn't with
sector,
all
A,
always.
and B, charities depend on donations from taxpayers and from people voluntarily giving, you know, pensioners giving a tiny amount of their minuscule income to charities that then go into these gross pay packets. I think it's completely disgusting.
Well, I want to bring in Sir Stephen Bubb here, who's been listening on this discussion, who's from the Association of Chief Executives of Voluntary Organisations. You're the one who called this focus on the salaries of charity directors a disgraceful distraction. Why?
Yes, thank you, and good morning from Barnsley. I think it's a distraction because charities are facing significant demands at the moment, falling income against rising demand. And I think it's disgraceful because it implies to the public that all charity chief executives are being paid these high salaries. And in fact, the majority on very modest salaries.
But many are, and that's the concern. I mean, how do you square that kind of pay with the fact, as Rosie said, these organisations ultimately rely very much on volunteers, some of whom may be unemployed, giving their time to the big society?
Absolutely, and there is a balance, and trustees in these very large charities who are working across the world in very difficult circumstances need to balance the pay to get the best talent at the top with the fact that they are working in charities where people give their money generously.
It's a bit of a gravy train, is it,
the public, if I could finish, I suspect the public do understand that it's means and ends, isn't it? The end is getting aid to people who desperately need it. So if you can pay someone to improve the performance of the charity, which these people have done, then I think that's a good balance.
Well, thank you, Stephen. Rosie?
Well, I would say, with all due respect, that Sir Stephen is in cloud cuckoo land, like these other executives, and on a particular level, you know, he had a 60th birthday party at the House of Lords, which cost £1,500, which Asivo paid half of. This is an organisation of voluntary organisations, and he uses 750 quid from it for his own birthday party at the House of Lords.
Sir Stephen?
Well, I don't think this is a story about me, actually. The trustees very kindly contributed. But the fact was that was a celebration of what Akivo has achieved. But this isn't a story about me. This is a story about charity chief executives.
That's money.
But Sir Stephen, there's a concern about whether there's a gravy train of people in public sector, high-paid jobs, charities, the House of Lords, who all sort of have quite a nice cushy deal at the top.
Yes, I think, I mean, it's very easy to smear people in these top jobs, and that's why I think it was a disgraceful distraction by the Charity Commission.
No, I understand.
I think the people who do these jobs in charities, especially international aid, do so not to line their pockets. They do so because they have a vocation, but frankly, they also have families.
But it's unjustifiable.
Just
let Sir Stephen finish, and then you can all respond.
But it is a point for him. Sir Stephen, if takings are going down for a charity, and the man or woman at the top continues to take a bonus or a pay rise, and yet less money is coming in, how do you justify that?
Yeah. Well, interestingly, the 14 charities that were highlighted in the Daily Telegraph have a turnover of 1.73 billion.
Some of which is declining.
Actually, last year they increased the amount they receive.
Okay.
So I think that probably points to the fact that against very difficult circumstances, those people at the top have managed to bring in more income, which has been used to, for example, save the children, working today with 130,000 refugees at a Syrian refugee camp.
Okay, so Stephen, just thank you very much for speaking to us. Rosie.
I do think it's slightly great, well, more than slightly. It makes me feel sick, actually, that the chief executives of Save the Children, 2 of them, are earning £160,000. They got bonuses.
It's really important to make sure that we're not tarring everybody with the same brush.
Excuse me, how can you have a bonus when you're dealing with critically ill children? Terribly vulnerable people.
All right, let Vicky answer that. Let Vicky answer that.
Inoculating more dying children.
I do think we need to be really careful here. The Telegraph highlighted 14 charities. There are 163,000 charities in the UK. The average charity CEO earns 58,000.
We're not talking about the average charity.
But I'm talking about the fact that
people are running
what Sir Stephen is saying here is that we're beginning to damage the reputation of people that run these organisations, and it's not representative.
Just a second, Rosie. The language of the private sector for dying children.
Well, I want to bring in Bishop John Arnold here, who was in our film. I think he's on the phone. Bishop John Arnold, what do you make of this real moral concern about whether charity should be paying big private sector style salaries and bonuses?
Well, I think there is a moral question here. There's no doubt about it. But at the same time, I don't want to make generalizations. I think that's been part of the problem of the story this last week. I can only speak for CAFOD, and we don't pay our director nearly as much as many other charities. What we have to do, I think, as a board of trustees, is to make sure we've got the right expertise in to use the money that people so generously give to the very best ability, and how silly it would be for people to give so generously and then to find that the money's not being properly used, that it's been frittered away, it's not properly accounted for at the front line. Okay. And I think we've got a very good director in place. I think we pay him the right salary for the job he does, and there's no bonuses or add-ons.
Okay.
And in fact, our charity pretty much year on year has increased in the money that it has to distribute and to use.
Bishop John Arnold, thank you so much for talking to us on the programme. I want to bring in Misha Wilmers now, who's a journalist specialising in social justice and international affairs. There is a sense from talking to Sir Stephen, and to some extent to Bishop Arnold, that charity bosses are being unfairly demonised here, are they?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. I think there may be a danger that this might be used as a tool to bash foreign aid and the work of charities in general. But I think there are also legitimate issues around executive pay which do need to be addressed, and particularly in the light of the prevalence of unpaid internships within the charity sector. One of the main arguments in defence of salaries that I've heard, is that the charity sector needs to attract the best talent and pay people what they're worth. And I think that's fine, except it seems completely disingenuous when over a third of the top 50 charities in England and Wales don't pay their interns. And some of the hardest workers within the charity sector are actually people doing full-time work for no wage. And I think that while that's the case, salaries in excess of £100,000 are difficult to justify.
Thank you so much. Joe Saxton, briefly, from NFP Synergies. It's a research consultancy firm for the non-for-profit sector. You've done research on how the public view charities. Executive pay, is it a real problem for how the public perceive them?
It's a real problem for how the public see charities. We've done some research recently, and 3/4 of the public said they saw chief executives as an admin cost. When we asked the public what worries them, again and again, they want to know how much of their money is going on the cause, and high salaries are one of the areas they're most concerned about. And when we asked them whether they think enough of their money is going to the cause and too much is going on admin, again and again, they worry that too much is going on admin and not enough to the cause. So for the public, this area is a real concern, and they want to know how they can be sure their donations are well spent.
Thank you, Joe. Vicky, is there a danger that charities are losing support because of behaving like business? You know, things like bombarding people with mail shots, the notorious charity mugger, you know, the chugger who stops you on the street.
Yes.
People don't like those techniques, and maybe they go hand in hand with this big business attitude.
Maybe they do, but I think we need to really capture the different ways we can get people's attention, find them in the street, find them online, find them on billboards, to get a good message across. If the media is bombarding us, selling us commercialism, we need to get in there and also be asking them to support good causes. And again, I think that the false dichotomy is it keeps being repeated. You know, do we want to put money to the front line for the cause, or for the senior staff, and they are one and the same thing. You get great people running an organisation, you get better, you know, you're getting aid taken to some of the most inhospitable places on earth in these foreign charities. They need staff.
Is this question, I think you were bringing up, Rosie, is whether there's a kind of poverty industry that big business keeps alive, you know, the way some charities are run.
Yes, I think there is, but I think that charities need to, people who work in charities, people who want to run a charity should want, actually people in the public sector should want to do the job for the good of the job, not for some enormous pay packet. I mean, you know, people, Sir Stephen's talking about, oh, it's not people lining their pockets, but how is 180,000 not a colossal salary? You know, it is far too much
There's an awful lot of industries where people are paid a lot more than the prime minister.
In these austerity-driven times, you know, fundraising is jolly hard at the best of times. People will be cancelling their direct debits. They'll be saying, I am not giving this money. They may transfer to a local charity, a smaller charity, but these big charities that do good work will lose a huge amount of support.
Well, I also wondered, because charities in many cases, and now in Britain, are picking up services that perhaps used to be provided by the state. Has that added to a sense of unease about pay?
I think it has. I mean, I reckon a lot of your viewers will have a Sunday Morning Live wake-up to all of this morning and won't realise that perhaps some charities that they support, and they maybe want to do some research to find out how much the boss is paid and how much goes in administration. But you comparing with other industries, I don't know that's fair. Listen, if somebody running a petrol company sells more petrol or more cornflakes or more products out of a supermarket, that's fine because consumers are spending money.
But I mean, NHS bosses, BBC bosses, there's all kinds of issues about pay.
This is people giving money because they think they're helping children who are ill, people with cancer, helping the elderly, helping people in other countries. That's how they get. No, but that's how they get their cash, and then the bosses have to be aware of that.
They also have good people
if they're not
to
doing a great
it.
job, they can't.
And also, many of these bosses are doing this having had a fantastic and very well-paid career in the private sector before. They've come to the charitable sector with the skills that they've built up in the private sector. Frankly, I think they should all just be paid the average, the national average, 20,000, and give the rest of their money to that charity.
Well, briefly, Vicky, what would you do with all the NHS bosses and executives in the public sector who pay these kinds of salaries?
It's really tricky. I think one of the things that irks me is people saying there needs to be more transparency in these charities. The truth is the salaries are set by trustees. If you go on the Charity Commission's website, you can find out the names of these people. I'm not saying that to you particularly, but people, there is transparency and there is wisdom behind this. So talk to the trustees and find out.
We'll have to leave it there. Thank you.